Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. So please take a moment, like and share the program. Let your friends know where you're hanging out at so that they can join us in the conversation. Also, if if you want to watch us live, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and or follow us on Facebook and hit the notification button. That way you get the alerts as soon as we go live. It's that simple. Also, please do us a favor and take a moment and go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. It's a cool place to go where you can find all sorts of cool Pro 2A swag. But every dollar that you spend there goes right back into the fight for a right to keep and bear arms so you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. There's a saying that, they say that certain things will happen when hell freezes over. Well, guess what? I do believe that hell has, in fact, frozen over. Many in the mainstream media, in particular at CNN, MSNBC, and those folks, are really quick to push the idea of more gun control. If you are opposed to gun control, then you are a very, very bad person, because obviously more gun control will stop mass shootings. I mean, obviously, the more gun control we have, whether or not it's something that really actually addresses anything relating to what actually happened, in the incident that's ever it spurred whatever the outrage of the day is, they'll tell you, well, you know what, we just need more gun control. Well, very interesting thing happened. CNN has finally admitted that, in fact, in a state with some of the strictest gun laws, the state of Illinois, there was a mass shooting that they were unable to stop. Let me get you a little bit more information about this particular. Now, just to kind of give you just a little bit of heads up as to what exactly occurred. So there was an individual, Mr. Gary Martin. Mr. Martin was not supposed to own a firearm. He was actually supposed to be prevented from owning a firearm. But he passed a background check and, went to work one day and they decided to fire him. And as a result, here's what happened.
Aurora Police Chief Kristen Zeman says the suspect was in illegal possession of a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson handgun equipped with a laser.
Some disgruntled person walked in and had access to a firearm that he shouldn't have had access to.
Investigators say he first purchased the weapon legally with a firearms owner's identification card. But when he applied for a concealed carry permit days later, a fingerprint screening turned up an aggravated assault conviction from 1995.
Once this felony conviction was discovered, the offender's conceal and carry permit was rejected and his FOID card was revoked by the Illinois State Police.
And is he supposed to volunteer the weapon?
The letter states that he needs to voluntarily relinquish the weapon, and we're looking into whether we followed up on that and what agencies followed up on that.
Okay, so let's just lay it out here for you. So this was an individual who had a criminal conviction, a felony criminal conviction in 1995, which was, in fact, a prohibiting offense. If you have a felony, you're supposed to be prohibited from purchasing a firearm. Well, evidently, that didn't stop him from going to purchase keep him from getting his firearm license his license to purchase a firearm in 2014. Now, mind you, he was then decided he wanted to go and get a concealed carry permit. Now, for some reason, all of a sudden in that background check, all of a sudden the conviction popped up. And, then they told him, so he was denied his concealed carry permit. Now, he was also, as the police chief noted, he was also notified that his FOIA card, his ability to own a firearm, his card had been revoked, and he was supposed to turn in his firearms. And at this point, nobody knew if anybody ever bothered to follow up with the guy they knew had guns and wasn't supposed to have it. Go figure. See, and you guys know, I've said this a long time ago, the problem with universal background checks is that, number one, the first issue is that most criminals, most people who are going to perpetrate a crime, if they know, if they're not knowingly going to go and buy a fire, go to where they can get they're not going to use a firearm that can be traced back to them. So they're not going to go buy a firearm that's going to be traced back to them and then use it in the commission of a crime. That's largely not going to happen. And in cases of instances, even with mass shootings, in most cases, there are people who have absolutely no, very little in their background that would lead one to believe that they in other words, they pass background checks, right? But in this case, you have an individual who passed a background check who shouldn't. In many cases, and this is not just, I'm not just relating to background checks, but in many cases, it's a failure of government programs, of government actually enforcing law that is the culprit. It's not background checks. It's not that people are able to, it's not, background checks it's not the firearm that is the problem. In this particular case, you had an individual who wasn't supposed to own a gun. In the case of Sutherland, Texas, you had an individual who should not have been able to purchase a gun. But at the same time, once again, you have background checks didn't work. In the state of California, they actually just did things that 25% of firearms obtained in California or purchased in California, once again, were done so without a background check. They found in California that it's not working. They've also found that most of the guns that they're finding at crimes, over 90%, are, guess what? Not in the possession of the person who originally purchased them, the person who is the quote-unquote registered owner, or who they know the owner to be. Because as I said before, criminals don't go buy guns in their own name so that they can go use them to commit a crime, because they're not going to use guns that can be traced back to them. But the thing that they don't tell you is not just, so by the way, we don't know how many people out there have been able to purchase guns who shouldn't have. We don't know that. They won't share, they won't divulge that information. In part because they don't know, because there's a lot of people out there who shouldn't have been able to buy guns that they don't know. But even with that, they like to brag about how many people have been denied. And that's the other thing. They like to brag about how many people have been denied the ability to purchase a firearm. Well, let's take a look at that real quick. All right, so here you have, and this is from an article, organization called The Trace. It's from a publication called The Trace that, by the way, is funded by Bloomberg. They hate guns. They're anti-gun. But in this case, they're bragging that, look, 76,142 people have failed their background checks, meaning those are all the people. And this was 2010, so this is the most recent numbers that I could find. If I could find close newer, I would have pulled these. I would have pulled this out for you. But this is the number. This is what I came up with. So, but 76,000, right? About 4,700 of them were cases that were sent to ATF for further investigation, and of that 76,000, only 62 cases were ultimately referred to federal prosecutors, and I don't know exactly how many of those were actually prosecuted. Now, to them, this is a huge win. Hey, look at that. 62 cases were referred, right? 4,700 people were under investigation. 76,000 people who shouldn't own guns were denied. Well, let's take a different look, a different perspective at those numbers. What that actually means is this. It means that 71,890 were false positives, wrongfully denied and had their rights infringed on. That's exactly what that means. That means that those individuals who should have been able to purchase a gun weren't able to, right? That's what it means. It means that it also means that 44 of them were actually properly denied and eventually prosecuted. Now, what does that mean if you get denied? You know what it means? It means you have to go to court. You have to appeal the denial, which means you have to go get an attorney, which can cost you thousands of dollars in order to overturn an appeal. Or I'm sorry, in order to win an appeal, in order to overturn that. So in other words, you now are guilty till proven innocent, even though you've done nothing wrong, you've committed absolutely no crime, but now you have to go to court and prove that you are innocent. Now, mind you, we've already done we've already talked about background checks, how it works. They don't even necessarily use like the spelling of your name. They may use names that sound similar or are phonetically the same. They don't even necessarily use your date, but they may use the approximate date or if any other information is similar. So in other words, they expand not just the universe of who you are, the unique and specific information that's specific to you, but they expand it out to things that might also have someone else who might be you. Maybe their social security number is somewhat close. Maybe their birthday, they were born in the same week. Maybe their name is spelled someone like yours. All of those things can result in you, in your background check being denied, in your ability to purchase a firearm being denied. That's why CNN had to admit it. They had to admit that, first of all, they had to admit that it didn't stop that shooting. Now, they didn't go as far as to admit that it doesn't stop shootings or that it doesn't stop mass shootings, even though evidence to the contrary clearly exists. I mean, you had the guy in Orlando, Florida. Interestingly, he was denied a concealed carry permit. He had issues. But yet and still, he was under investigation by the FBI, and yet he was still able to purchase a firearm. You had the case in Tehama County here in California, where the individual they didn't bother to take all of his guns, and it turns out he was able to manufacture his own firearm. The thing is that if someone wants to commit a crime, with a firearm, they are going to get a firearm. And that's just the God's honest truth. And when they do have these systems in place, well, more often than not, they fail. Or at least we see that they fail quite often in the case of these mass shootings. Well, anyway, folks, hey, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. Thank you so much for tuning in. We very much appreciate you guys watching. We appreciate you guys following the Firearms Policy Coalition and telling everyone about who we are. As we like to say, we are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.